The trouble with fighting for human freedom is that one spends most of one's time defending scoundrels, for it is against scoundrels that oppressive laws are first aimed, and oppression must be stopped at the beginning if it is to be stopped at all. H.L. Mencken. All right, good morning. Welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad Podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. I'm your host, DL, America's most objective libertarian. If you're tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time so early. All right, good morning, folks. We're back at it. I've got some changes being made here, so you may see some wonkiness or some things that are just kind of a little different. Long story short, I am using a different portion of Rumble to stream from, just some technical details behind the scenes. So if anything seems off, please let me know in the chat. That way I can just kind of be aware and figure out if there's any, if there's anything that I need to do or whatnot. So speaking of Rumble, let me give you a quick update. Yes, let's see, no live on Rumble. No, it should be live on Rumble. Let's see here. Should be. That would be weird. I don't know. Live on Rumble? It should be. That's. I see that my VA lady is like, hey, there's nothing live on Rumble, but I don't know. And that's weird. Let me go to the Rumble homepage. Let's just see. Shows live, as far as I can tell. All right. Let's just take a wait. We will take a quick look, and we will see. Let's see here. My channels. We'll go to my channel. I don't know. That is so weird that I'm using Rumble's platform, their RTMP, and that's the technical behind the scenes. And it seems like you're saying that there's no live on Rumble. I don't know. Shows that everything looks good from here as far as I can tell. That's interesting. Connected. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know why it's not going on. That is so weird. I got nothing. I got nothing on this one. It should be. Don't know. We will have to continue on. I cannot resolve it now. So I don't know what's going on. Apparently I'm using their studio incorrectly. That's just fun. All right, well, just add that to yeah, no, it seems to show me not live. I don't understand. The stream is going. It's going out. I mean, it's out on Facebook. It is out on YouTube, as far as I can tell. It's out on X. Anyway, don't care right now because show must go on. So I'm sorry for all the Rumble folk that aren't getting to watch it. But this is where we are. We will have to just keep going forward. Speaking of Rumble, yes, I made the update. We know that I'm in the Rumble Creator Program, or was. I am bailing on it. Bailing on the program, not necessarily on Rumble. You can tune in tomorrow for the full details. I'm just going to lay it out for everybody. And we will add the fact that today I should be streaming to Rumble, and for whatever reason, their own system is not streaming it to Rumble Live. So don't know what to tell you about that, folks. Apologies. But don't know what else to do here. I don't see any other buttons to click that say, hey, send me to Rumble. If it's sending it to Rumble, if it's sending it to YouTube, it's sending it to Facebook, sending it to X, and not sending it to Rumble from Rumble's own system, and there's no obvious button here to click, I don't know. But it's showing me that no, no, I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it there. Oh. Oh, that's fun. Okay. So Rumble does this. I think I know what's going on, and I will try to figure this out. So what Rumble does is it has when you sign in, you're a user, and then you create a channel. And so it's sending the stream to the user, which is Liberty Dad Media. So you can go to rumble.com/user/Liberty Dad Media, and you should see it. But for whatever reason, it's not sending it to the channel. So I will have to figure out how to get it to send to the channel specifically. And I don't know why it's not going to the channel. So that's what's going on. And that's funny because I actually had that same problem initially when I started. So I will just so it is live on Rumble. But we will see. So, but it is live to my user account, not to my channel. So that's a lot of fun. So whatever, we will just add that to my list of critique tomorrow. That's where we are. Anyway, today, what are we talking about? By the way, let me just add real quick. If you're watching from YouTube, go ahead and make a subscribe. Make a subscribe. Who is this guy? If you're watching me on Rumble, go to my channel, Liberty Dad, all one word, and follow me there. We'll get this all straightened out here the next day or two. And then how can you support the channel? Well, you can do a number of things. You could repost you can share some links and clips. Like, feel free to clip anything. Although, if you clip something, you take me out of context, I might have to take a swing at you, so be careful. At any rate, so yeah, help the channel out. You can go to, and you'll see it here in a little bit. You can go to youtube.libertydad.com. You can basically type in the social media name .libertydad.com. There's 4 social media. So you can go to youtube.libertydad.com. You can go to rumble.libertydad.com. You can go to facebook.libertydad.com. And you can go to x.libertydad.com. And you can find the feed there. So be a champ. Go check those places out. Follow me or subscribe, however it works on that particular platform. Make sure you share the content. And if you feel so inclined, if there's something that I said that's particularly interesting, go ahead and clip that. Tag me on social media. And more than likely, I'll probably give you a repost. Anyway, let's continue. Let's get into this, because I don't like the idea of starting my Monday morning bill reviews by talking about Rumble. We'll talk about that tomorrow. What are we talking about today? Well, as it turns out, legislators, they love coming up with legislation. And I don't really love it, but in a sense, I love it. It's like a love-hate relationship. I love to pick it apart and see what's wrong with it. So I saw this comment. Some people are going on about some legislation that's supposedly going to help out, protect our children from porn. And that doesn't sound like a bad idea now, does it? Like, who wouldn't want to protect our children from porn, right? It's for the children, right? Like, that's a good argument, right? Well, here at the Liberty Dad Show, number one, we do want to protect our children, first and foremost. So that answer is absolutely yes, we do. The second thing is we look at how you do it. That's important. So you might remember the movie Ender's Game, or maybe you read the books. At the end of the movie, he realizes that he got tricked into destroying all these aliens, all these creatures. And he's pissed. And he's like, how you win matters. And it's true. How we try to protect the children matters. You can do it in ways that are good and beneficial. You can do it in ways that are just like, at the end of the day, they don't really accomplish anything. You can pat yourself on the back and you can say, oh, we did something, but does it really work? Well, if not, then you shouldn't get a pat on the back. And here's the thing, when it comes to a lot of legislation, when you dive right into it. Number one, a lay person like me can see, hey, there's some problems here. And because we have these problems, I don't think this is going to work. Then what happens is legislation gets passed, and then whoever was part of it, they pat themselves on the back, and we all move forward. And nobody ever returns and says, by the way, did that legislation do what it said it was going to do? So in this particular case, the first thing that we do is we say, what is the legislation supposed to do? So first, let me show you a couple images here. So this is Representative Mary Miller, and she says, the porn industry is complicit in rotting the minds of our children at rates we have never seen. We must hold corrupt adult film companies accountable by enforcing strict age verification. Pass the Screen Act now. So that was the Screen Act. And then that act, let's take a look at that one here. So here's an image that she used to promote it. Okay, protect our children from harmful online pornography. And so she got together with Mike Lee out of Utah. Okay, so they're going to protect our children from porn. That is the goal. Protect children from porn. Okay. Then she has another post, and you're actually going to get a twofer today. You thought it was just one bill review. We're going to actually go through two. So this is another one. New Representative Miller, the House sponsor of the bill, told the Daily Caller that online porn is, quote, alarmingly destructive and far outside the bounds of protected speech under the Constitution. Oh, okay. So that's very interesting. And so the flyer, the little graphic that she has for this one, all right, here's this. You can't see the text down there below, so let's go ahead and zoom in on that. It says exclusive new GOP bill seeks to take a sledgehammer to online porn industry. The bill would pave the way for the prosecution of obscene content disseminated across state lines or from foreign countries, and open the door to federal restrictions or bans regarding online porn. Oh, so that's interesting. Now, mind you, these are two separate bills. So in one bill, the claim is we're going to protect your children. And the other bill is, hey, we're going to go after porn because we don't like it. That's basically, we're going to expand the definition of obscenity. So that's very interesting, because now I have to wonder, what is the motivation for quote unquote protecting our children? Well, let's take a look. Turns out she actually gave an interview, and we're going to walk through this interview, and we're going to listen. And then we're also going to go through the bill. We're going to kind of skim through it and just highlight some things that just a regular, everyday, average person can read and then say, is this good? What are some potential pitfalls? Right? Because at the end of the day, if the goal is to protect children, then we should make sure that we actually protect children. Right? That sounds like it makes sense, because it makes sense to me. So let's take a look. Let's see. Let's look at this first video here. And this first video, now this one is the interviewer introducing it. So let's just take a listen.
Parents have a lot to contend with when it comes to protecting the innocence of their children. But great news. Help may be on the way. In this Congress, a bill has been reintroduced which would protect children from one of the worst and, unfortunately, one of the most prolific plagues in modern society, and that would be internet pornography. Well, how will this kind of a bill fare in Congress? And really, more importantly, how would it impact our children?
Okay. Fair questions. Right now, his leadoff, I thought, was interesting, because he was like, parents have a lot to contend with. Yeah. They always have. Now, is it getting more? You could argue yes. I mean, obviously, if you were a parent, 1,000 years ago, you don't have tablets and screen time. You don't have crazy television. You might have, the kids down the road, maybe they're bullies. I'm sure that probably existed. Right. So I would argue, I would not argue that parents have a lot to contend with, nor would I argue necessarily that parents have, the same level. Like my grandparents, when they were raising my mom and dad, they likely had fewer things to worry about. because they barely had TV, okay, let alone the internet, but they still had challenges to face, challenges that they weren't aware of, right? I think we need to not worry, we need to work past this idea that a parent is going to always be in the know. There will always be something that your child is trying to get past you. This is just how it works. My son does that. He's 6. That's what they do. Children behave that way. They're like, oh, I want this, and maybe I'm going to try to disguise, that I'm going to come up with some crazy reason why I should get this, or maybe I'll sneak and I just won't tell them, or maybe I'll do it. And then when they ask me, they're pretty clever. And when my parents ask me, this will be the defense I give them, right? Now, are they plotting and scheming? I wouldn't go that far, but all these things happen, right? You ask your kid, you're like, why'd you do that? And they're like, well, because this, and you're like, really? Come on, right? So I get it. I know where we are. But again, at the end of the day, we are talking about legislation, and we need to make sure that it's good legislation. So starting off, I think we need to just kind of be mindful. Yes, parents have a lot. That's what you signed up for. So let's get to the next video here, and then we're gonna see what she has to say. I've got 5 videos. That was 1, so we'll check out 4 more here.
Well, joining me now to discuss this is Illinois Representative Mary Miller. She is the sponsor of this act. She represents the 15th District of the great state of Illinois. Representative Miller, welcome back to Washington Watch. Always an honor to have you.
Well, thank you so much. And like you said, today, Senator Mike Lee and I introduced the bill shielding children's retinas from egregious exposure on the Net Act, more easily referred to as the Screen Act.
Okay, so I'm just going to pause right here and just say, Congress, if you don't stop making foolish acronyms out of everything, we're going to shake you like a baby.
I understand what parents are up against now that the cell phone is in practically everybody's hands, and blockers and filters are not working. So this bill is going to require the porn websites to use age verification methods.
Okay. That doesn't sound so bad at first, right? Like, hey, you got to verify the age of somebody before they can before they can access internet pornography. Now, on the surface, that sounds reasonable to most people, okay? Because if you're not supposed to be watching it until you're 18, then you just say, hey, before you provide it to somebody, make sure that they're 18. But it starts getting tricky from there.
So how would that work? Is there any way for a child to lie about their age? Or, when there's age verification, what does that look like? Yeah,
it's super interesting. There's multiple ways to do it, and I think it's going to be very effective. And what was introduced to me is that it's not going to violate people's privacy. They've actually come out with technology where the screen would show a hand, and you have to put your hand up and do different movements, and that technology can identify the age of the child.
Okay. That sounds interesting. So let's take a look at what that what that actually ends up looking like. Let's see, where's my screen here? Is it being uncooperative again? Let's do this. There we go. All right, there we are. All right. So this is from Crikey. This is from Australia. So a news outlet from Australia. Australia is testing hand scans to figure out your age. No one outside the company that created it has used the technology yet, so it's not in place. Okay, no big deal. French company Needemond, I think, claims it can tell whether someone is an adult with 99% accuracy using video footage of their hand movements. All right, what if there was a way to verify someone's age online without requiring ID or even using their appearance? If you could tell someone was an adult with 99% accuracy simply by assessing the way they move their hands, I mean, if you could tell someone was an adult, it's like an incomplete sentence. It's interesting. Anyway, that's one of the methods being tested by the Australian federal government as it joins with a wave of governments around the world that are currently passing laws requiring social media, porn, and gambling companies to take steps to restrict teens from using their services. In response to the trend, an industry of companies that say they can do the hard work of figuring out a person's age over the internet has emerged. Their methods include checking documents like driver's license, passports, and credit cards, or increasingly forms of biometric analysis that use people's physical features as a form of, quote, age assurance, or in plain language, estimation. All right. One provider, French AI company Niedemond, claims to be able to determine whether someone is an adult with 99% accuracy by analyzing their hand movements. So said the company's chief business officer, Jean-Michel Pauly, in an interview with Crikey. It's a remarkable claim that has yet to be independently verified. Oh, that's interesting. So it is not even verified yet. So our congresswoman has a bill, and as we'll see, the bill does not specify these are the specific verification forms for which we will accept. They're just like, you gotta verify the age. Okay? So we're already in first problem right here. Right? She's in this interview and she's like, look, you can verify by the hand. Now I researched that a little bit. How does that work? Basically, the idea is you put your hand up and you do a series of movements. And apparently, when you're younger, there's something that the computer will be able to recognize and see that your hand movements are slightly different. Presumably, maybe something along the line of like, the way that the way that your hand moves will kind of show like, I don't know, the age, your age based on like the nerves or how it's supposed to move, something along that line. It wasn't clear to me, and I'm clearly not articulating it very well now. I remember reading it the other day when I was doing some research on this, and I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Like, how do you do it? Do you read like the wrinkles? And that's not what it does. It actually has you do a bunch of hand movements, and then the hand movements are interpreted in order for the computer to determine, okay, about what age you are, because we expect, these results from somebody who's 17 and these results from somebody who's 30. Now, can it tell the difference between a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old? It's not quite clear. But what we can tell is that right now it's not been independently verified. So the company itself is claiming it, and then we have a Congress member who's like, well, it's not been independently verified, but this is one way that it can work. Okay, it's not giving me the warm and fuzzy when it comes to legislation. What I want to know, first and foremost, is how robust is this? We haven't even gotten to the part where we talk about, is it appropriate for you to select, particular verification methods? Is it appropriate for you to impose it upon, say, the porn sites, right? Or should it be like, who should be verifying this? And we'll talk about that here in just a moment. There's plenty of other questions, but right now, right off the bat, I'm like, I don't know. You want me to support legislation based on this one form of verification that's not even independently verified? That's not how I work. I don't support legislation for that. All right, let's continue listening to the next clip. What do we got here?
So the goal here is to protect children.
Right.
What would happen if it is determined?
Okay, perfect. The goal is to protect children. That's what she said the goal is. Okay? Keep that in mind.
Determined that a child is underage. By law, what would be required of these web sites?
Well, they're going to have to use that, or they'll be liable for exposing children to indecent materials. And I'll have to come back on another time. I don't think we'll have time to explain the technology better and the other methods there are multiple ways of identifying, because say an adult is on or wants to access it and they have some kind of disability, there are other methods, but it is going to be effective.
Okay, so she's promising us that it will be effective, and she makes a very interesting point. She said, like, look, maybe you're an adult with a disability, so like maybe you have some problem where you can't get your hand up, right? You can only get it down. We're talking about porn, right? But you can't get your hand up in front of the screen. You know, maybe you've got some sort of, you know, shoulder issue or whatever, or maybe you've got some other disability that would prevent you from being able to properly do the motions so that this screen can verify you. So then what? Well, now you've got to use some other form, right? So she's already promoting one concept that only one company has that has not yet been identified or verified. It's not been verified whether or not it's true. Now she's pointing out, okay, well, there are multiple forms. So now a website, they're going to have, they like, according to her, they can utilize this hand program, this hand system. Just does anybody kind of find it weird that we're going to verify porn with possibly the same hand? Anyway, let's leave that alone. So she's already pointed out a flaw, because now it's not going to be just this one verification system. Because if you want to use this verification system, well, now you're going to have to include alternatives for people that maybe, for whatever, maybe they lost a hand, right? Maybe their hand is disfigured. You know, they lost some fingers, you know, for whatever. They were, you know, working out in the garage and they had an accident. And so maybe now that this has left them where their hand is no longer, you know, in a position to be able to be verified. So now they're going to have to verify through some other system. Okay? So this is already a problem, because now we're getting into multiple systems that have to be implemented. Right? All right. Let's continue to the next video here. Let's see here.
The government should have a compelling interest in protecting its citizens, but especially the most vulnerable, which would be our children. And I'm sure you and the listeners know that the pornography online keeps going lower into the gutter. It's very degrading, and it's become violent and just very gross, and it causes it has a life-altering impact on the children. It interferes with normal sexual development. It causes depression, addiction, risky sexual behavior, and you know, just lifelong problems.
Look, I hate to be mean here, but am I the only one that just listened to this and was like, are you sure you even know what the problem, you know, how this affects children? She seemed incapable of, like, she's authoring legislation. We got to protect the children. What's the number one thing that you should be able to do if you're saying we have to protect children or anyone? You should be able to articulate what the problem is. And she's like, it's really just gross and nasty and very obscene and violent. Like, okay, perhaps all of those are true. Some of those are very subjective. What she considers gross and what somebody else considers gross are vastly different. So, for instance, once upon a time, I was an evangelical. And I'm not dumping on evangelicals. But I remember growing up, and it was very common that we would be very careful about the kind of media that we consumed. And I remember a friend of mine, he had what I called it the Jesus DVD player, okay? Because what it would do, it had some system where it would skip past certain scenes, and it would bleep out profanity for you, so you could like watch a film, and it was almost like it converted it on the fly to made for TV. Is kind of what it did. I never actually got to see it in action, but one of my friends was talking about that or had it or something. But there was this DVD player. And I remember, by the way, Hollywood objected to it because they were like, oh, yeah. Anyway, we're not going to get into that. But they objected to it and they tried to sue, and that was so foolish. But the point here being, for many evangelicals, what was considered offensive was a lot of things were considered offensive to them that may not be considered offensive to the typical person. And they were like, look, we don't want to have any profanity. We don't want to see any steamy scenes, even if there's no nudity, right? They were opposed to this. But that's not necessarily widespread. It's not understood. This is obscene. This is offensive. So different groups, different people will have different metrics for what is considered offensive. Some people might say anything that shows any kind of sexual activity online, that would be offensive. And other people might say, well, okay, if it's just a quick, kiss, and then, maybe it's like 30 seconds of, them kind of becoming intimate, but it doesn't show anything, they might say, okay, that's not so bad. And then other people might say, okay, well, if it's a little intimate scene and maybe it just quickly shows a bare butt, then maybe that's not offensive. And other people might say, well, maybe some quick frontal nudity, maybe that's not as offensive depending on the context, right? So like everybody's going to have this different perspective. And then you have Representative Miller here who can't even tell you what's wrong with it. Like she just sounds like she's just going from what somebody else, like I'm not suggesting that she should necessarily go watch it, but perhaps you should watch it and go, I was doing my research and I saw something the other day that I was barely able to even look at the screen, and then you don't have to describe it in detail. I'm just saying, like, it seems like she doesn't really know what she's talking about. That's all I'm saying. And if you're going to pass legislation for the whole United States, perhaps you should know what you're talking about. I'm just saying. Perhaps you should be able to articulate it. Perhaps, I would expect that she could better articulate the problem than she could the hand scanner. But she seemed to do better with the hand scanner. She's like, oh, man, they could verify your age with the hand, the way you move it, blah, blah, blah. And they could tell, whether you're, an adult or not. We don't know the details. We don't know, can it distinguish between a 17-year-old and an 18-year-old and a 19-year-old? I would presume not. And look, let's be honest, 17-year-old, for the purposes of legislation, is not an adult. They're not. So the idea here is we have to be very clear, like, yes, this can distinguish between 17 and 18, right? Because otherwise you're not really solving the problem that you say you're trying to solve. This is not me saying like it's not good enough. I'm just saying like, look, if you're going to solve a problem, then solve it. Don't give us this half-baked solution. And then also maybe be able to articulate what the problem is. All right, let's look at this last video.
How much support does this have?
I think not enough support. We're going to have to work on it because people are worried about privacy things. So they need to be...
Privacy things. It's always fun when you have a member of Congress promoting a bill and they're like, privacy things. It's funny in a sad way because she just doesn't seem to really be... Now, maybe she's bad at interviews. Maybe that's what it is. And maybe she's bad at interviews, but really great at legislation. I doubt it. But it's just wild. Like, she can't articulate the problem. She's like, it's just gross. Okay? Lots of things are gross. Okay? Like if you have to work in a nursing home and clean up somebody's, bodily fluids, I think that's gross. Doesn't make it porn. Gross is not, like, that's a very broad term. So that's not something that I would say, when I'm trying to pass legislation. I would say, like, look, here's the problem. Here's what's going on. Here's what we need to do. Here's how we're going to resolve this particular problem. And by the way, since people have concerns about their privacy, not privacy things, since people have concerns about their privacy, here's how I'm going to address that. And so that But she didn't. She kind of made more questions in a previous clip there because she was like, well, some people may have, a disability that prevents them from showing their hand and being able to verify their age, so they're going to have to use an alternative method. Okay, that alternative method, does that maintain somebody's privacy? Because the idea of the hand is supposed to. The idea is that you can show your hand up on the screen and it will say, whoever you are, I don't know you, but based on this, you are of age. Okay, that's presumably how it works. Then that there's nothing else that we need to know. The full details we're not, I didn't see the full details, but as far as I can tell, the idea is that this is biometric and it can determine somebody's age without knowing who they are. Therefore, their privacy is made intact. But then if you have a disability, are there alternative ways to be able to view pornography and protect your privacy? Or is it like, oh, okay, if this all of a sudden doesn't work, right? There's so many problems with this. Anyway, let's continue listening.
Informed about how we're going to identify that the child is under 18. And we do have the technology and the methods to do that. So once people become assured of that, I believe it will pass. Who would vote against this? We have to protect our children. This is a rot in our nation.
Okay, so who would vote against this? I can give you some examples, maybe not specific names, but of who. Somebody that might say, I don't think you understand the problem well enough to be implementing a solution. Somebody might vote against it and say, well, it's not clear in this text, in this bill, exactly like what constitutes legitimate age verification, what does not. And I don't mean like, I'm not suggesting like, okay, if it's, is 18 a legitimate age? I'm talking about the technology. What technology does Congress consider to be robust enough to be used, right? What about the punishment? We're going to see in a little bit. There's no punishment in there. What's the punishment supposed to be if you fail to use these, right? Like there's a lot of unanswered questions. Those are the kind of people that might vote against it. And they should. This idea of just waving children around and saying, look, I've got a bill. You've got to do this. That's not good enough. And we'll see that. The bill itself tells us that. So let's see what else we got here. I think it's all the, that's all the graphics that we've got. So what I'm going to do, let's go to comments really quickly. And then we'll take an intermission. And when we come back from intermission, we'll dig into the bills itself. And you're right. You're like, wait a minute. She was only talking about one bill. You're right. But as I pointed out, there are two different bills. Okay, if we go back to the, let's see here. There it is. There we go. So if we go back to this, so the online porn is alarmingly destructive and far outside the bounds of protected speech under the Constitution. That's one bill. We haven't even talked about that one just yet. It's not really a complimentary bill, but it kind of tells you where she might actually be thinking and where she might not being straightforward with you. Then you have this other bill. This one is the Screen Act. So this is the one where she had, and we'll look at that crazy long name that she had, protecting the children's retinas from whatever. We will evaluate that one first. But before we do that, let's go to comments here real quick. I don't know if I can put them up on the screen. You guys will have to tell me. I can click on them from this new this new dashboard here that I've got, but I don't know that they actually get up on screen. So just let me know. Let's see. Just Oddsman says, just call it hand waving, DL. Yeah, I probably should. Yeah, it doesn't go on the screen. That's kind of lame. I don't like this new look. Don't worry, I'll be critiquing all of this tomorrow on the show. Let's see. Interesting. Joe says, now I see ads again. Didn't see ads when it wasn't working. Interesting. I don't know why you're seeing ads, but again, we'll talk about that. Oddsman says, these Republicans always want small government to do their parenting for them. Isn't that the truth? And, I did an episode a while back. It was like, what episode? It was like 100 something. It was a while back. Somebody had asked me, they said, how do you fight the culture? How do you protect your child from the culture war? And so I dug into that. And I in my opinion, and this is what I'm going to say, for a parent, your job is to protect your children, not Congress's. It's your job. Don't be lazy. Now you might say, DL, that's not fair. Lots of things aren't fair. I mean, aren't we teaching our children that? Life isn't fair. It's your job to protect them. And the truth is, everybody, every parent, they may fall within some range of each other, but every parent is going to have a slightly different expectation for what is permissible for their child, right? Like, I got a friend, lives down the road. He's a pastor. What he finds acceptable for his children may very well be different, more strict than what I find acceptable for my child, right? So we have to balance that in society. Let's see, what else we got? Oh, you know what? I don't have the music on. I can at least do that. If I can't get the text on the screen, we might as well at least get the music. Let's see here. Let's see. Do. Some of you guys are funny. That's an interesting point. How come we never hear politicians say we have to protect the children, abolish Social Security scam? I mean, come on, not Joe. I think you know why. Because that's a good scam, right? Good scam. Let's see. There's a good point here, Keith. War is gross, but it is not banned to protect the children, not in media or reality. Man, aren't you going after some sacred cows this morning? Think about that for a second. We've been having this huge debate in the media on whether or not Israel is going too hard at Palestine. And a lot of it is we're like, it's an awful lot of dead children. Nobody says, oh my God, we got to protect the children. It's always around things, weirdly enough, that they don't like. Don't like porn? Man, we got to protect the children. Don't like cigarettes? We got to protect the children. Don't like alcohol? We got to protect the children. Right? Don't like gay families? We got to protect the children. Isn't that weird how that works? But you're like, oh, when it comes to war, all of a sudden it's like, well, there are casualties of war, including these children. Don't like abortion? That was another one. Don't like abortion? We got to protect the children, right? People always want to protect the children. Hey, look, I named things from the right. The left, you're not off the hook either. Don't like religious fundamentalism? We got to protect the children, right? Don't like, parents that don't accept trans kids? We got to protect the children, right? Don't like the fact that people aren't big about the trans community? We got to protect the children. So the left, they're right along there, with it. Right now, the right is in power, and so therefore, there's a lot of ammo toward the right. So it might look like we're just poking at one side, but the truth is, there's two sides to this, and both of them are just as guilty. Let's see, what else? Oddsman says, protect the children is the root passphrase to the U.S. Constitution. Tim May on Cypherpunks. Yeah, I agree. That's kind of like a passphrase. What that means, if I understand, I've not read that particular, but just based on my understanding of what he said, is a passphrase just kind of gives you access to whatever you want. So when you say protect the children, all of a sudden people are like, do anything you want. But Liberty Dad says, nope. And I will take a stand and I will say, that is not a good way to do this. There are good ways to accomplish things, and there are bad ways to accomplish things. And we have to recognize it. And yes, being a proper Liberty Dad or Liberty Mom means that you look and you evaluate things and you say, is this efficacious? I believe that's the word I want. Is this effective? Will it do what we're saying we're going to do, or are we just going to basically pat ourselves on the back and go, look what I did, even if it doesn't solve any problems? I mean, let me point this out. The drug war has been going on since the 70s, and it's been a catastrophic failure. And we've been doing that to protect the children. I've played that clip of Jackie Robinson from the 70s, and he's on the Dick Cavett show, and he tells you, he says, the drug problem is more serious, more of a threat to our children than the race problem, which is, that's a wild conversation on itself. But he points out in the 70s that we needed to do something about the drug problem. Well, guess what? It's 2025. It's like 60 years later, and we still haven't resolved that. We still haven't gotten our hands You know, we're not saving the children from drugs. You could argue and say we're actually doing worse. So, you know, the passphrase, it gives you access, but that doesn't mean it gives you effectiveness. Let's see what else. Okay, so my VA lady points out, if Rumble works correctly, everyone should have 2 skippable ads when the stream starts unless you pay for Rumble Premium. But I guess now in Rumble Premium, you will have to listen to ad reads. Yeah, we'll discuss that tomorrow. So, just let that know. Wait until there are AI sex robots in houses. Oh boy. We'll leave that one alone. All right, folks, let's go to intermission here real quick and make sure everything's set up correctly so that it works as expected. So let's see, do that. There we go.
What's up, Solutionaries? Maj 2 right here, founder of Black Guns Matter and the Solutionary Center. We offer basic firearms classes, conflict resolution, and a whole host of other skill sets that are beneficial to our communities all around America. We're able to do these classes because of your voluntary donations. We don't accept government funds. The people that choose to pay it forward to remove the financial barrier to entry are choosing to do so voluntarily. So you can support at givesendgo.com/solutionary. Give it whatever level you can afford to do. Repost the content. Let folks know that we have a community to save and we have to do it ourselves together. givesendgo.com/solutionary. Be safe, be solutionary.
Hey, Liberty fam, do me a favor. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button to my channel. And for the really serious folks out there, I want you to hit that bell so that you never miss an episode. By the way, if you want to support the show, head over to libertydad.locals.com and sign up. For $5, you can be part of this show. There, I'll engage supporters of the show. We'll discuss topics that you want me to talk about, response videos that you would like to see, or anything related to the show. And I'll even have a monthly... All right. I'm interrupting that video. I messed up. I made a brand new video, and then I didn't add it to the queue. So we're just going to interrupt that. We're just going to move forward. Let's just consider this a rough day. We'll put it that way. Yeah, so I changed some things in that video. And so there is no longer a locals, so don't bother going there. And I'll give you all the full details tomorrow. For today, let's just dive right into this, what we want to talk about today. So let's look at this bill, the Screen Act. That's not it. Where'd you go here? Dude, there we go. Okay. No, that's not it. Why is it being difficult? There. Okay. There we go. All right. So we're going to look at the Screen Act here. I promise you, I am prepared today. I am just fumbling around. It's just one of those days. You know, I don't want to call it a case of the Mondays because we all know that's not any good. But we'll get past this and we'll move forward. So here's the bill. All right. This act may be cited as the Shielding Children's Retinas from Egregious Exposure on the Net Act or the Screen Act. Look, you need shaking like a baby when you start. Like, this is just ridiculous. Just give it a friggin' name. You don't have to be clever. Like, stop trying to be clever and then just give us the name. All right, over the 3 decades preceding the date of enactment of this act, Congress has passed several bills to protect minors from access to online pornographic content. Okay, they go on, and this is with the exception of the Children's Internet Protection Act. The Supreme Court of the United States has struck down the previous efforts of Congress to shield children from pornographic content, finding that such legislation constituted, quote, a compelling government interest, but that it was not the least restrictive means to achieve such interest. So basically what happened is Congress has been like, look, here's a bill, they pass it, we're going to protect your children. It gets challenged because people go and basically say, hey, you might be protecting children, but in the process, you are making it more difficult for me as an adult to engage in my right to view this kind of material. And then the Supreme Court's like, yeah, okay, so you have this thing called the compelling government interest, but It requires the least restrictive means, and you have not accomplished that. Okay, so that's what they're laying out. Then they go on and they say, in the nearly 2 decades since the Supreme Court of the United States suggested the use of blocking and filtering software, such technology has proven to be ineffective in protecting minors from accessing online pornographic content. The Kaiser Family Foundation has found that filters do not work in 1 in 10 pornography sites accessed intentionally and 1 in 3 pornography sites that are accessed unintentionally. Further, it has been proven that children are able to bypass blocking and filtering software by employing strategic searches or measures to bypass the software completely. In other words, it seems like they're saying right here, Congress hasn't been able to do it, and even the Supreme Court, who suggested an idea, that idea didn't work. So we have no ideas that work. But we should totally give Congress another chance because they're totally going to get this one right. All right. Additionally, Pew Research, I don't have this all highlighted. Pew Research has revealed studies showing that only 39% of parents use blocking or filtering software for their minors' online activities, meaning that 61% of children only have restrictions on their internet access when they are at school or at a library. So maybe that's why these blocking and filtering methods don't work, because so few people are using them that nobody's bothered putting their energy into making them or making them more robust. Why bother? If nobody wants to use it, then why would you pour money into it? So it seems like right here, we kind of already have our answer, because here's another way to say this. And this isn't going to make the porn crusaders very happy. Only 39% of parents care to block and filter software for their minors' online activity. So you're not really helping parents. You are trying to be the parent, right? It's not like they're saying, hey, 80% of parents are using this and have found it frustrating and have reached out to Congress and said, can you do something else? That's not what they're telling us. They're telling us that most parents, not interested for one reason or another. Maybe the parents don't care. Maybe the parents aren't aware of how bad it can be. And yes, I do agree it can be bad. Look, I'm just going to tell you, in my 47 years, maybe not 47 years, since the internet became popular, since I had broadband in my 20s, I have seen more things that I don't want to see online than I care to tell you about. Okay? Like plenty. There's a lot of stuff on there, and I've seen some pretty vile stuff. My son should never see, ever. Not even when he's an adult. Okay? Some stuff you just don't need to see it. I'm not trying to ban it. I'm not trying to write laws against it. But I'm acknowledging that, yes, there are things on the internet that I absolutely don't want my son to see, whether he's 6 or 36. Okay? But if 39% of the parents aren't putting an effort in, then that kind of tells you that perhaps this bill doesn't have support for a reason, because people don't really care that much. Now, maybe a lot of parents aren't like me and they just don't know what's out there. They just think, oh, they saw, the last time they saw porn was in the 70s, it's just some naked people and they're doing their thing, seemed kind of normal, except for the whole maybe, on video part. But otherwise, people might remember something that they saw when they were younger and go, yeah, I saw porn, it's not that bad, and whatever. So maybe they don't think their sweet little Johnny is looking it up. Maybe that's part of the problem. There could be any number of reasons. But the fact of the matter is, only 39% of parents are even attempting to use it. So I think that's your first problem. They're not interested. So when you say this stuff doesn't work, why doesn't it work? Does it not work because, people are putting a half-assed effort into it? Or does it not work because it was never going to work in the first place? We don't know. We're not getting that level of detail. Then they go on, they say 17 states have now recognized pornography as a public health hazard that leads to a broad range of individual harms, societal harms, and public health impacts. Now, I find this kind of funny because there are 50 states. We're not quite at half, basically roughly about a third. About a third of them have said pornography is a public health hazard. And the author of the bill stammered, she stammered all over the place trying to describe exactly how it was a health hazard. She said things like it's gross and obscene and stuttered her way through. She couldn't even articulate it. She couldn't go read up and say, okay, what did these states say about it? And do I agree with it? And is that something that, Congress should be doing something about? And how are we going to, she seemed ill prepared to talk about this. If you propose legislation, if it's got your name on it, you should be able to talk all about it. You should be able to say, oh, yeah, here's why we need this bill. You should be able to say 17 states have recognized that it's a public health hazard. Here are some of the things that they're saying that make it a public health hazard. Then we can have an argument or a debate or a conversation, right? We can discuss whether or not that is a good definition of what it means to be a public health hazard. Perhaps they're right. Perhaps they're wrong. We don't know because the author of the bill, and when I say author, I should say sponsor. She didn't necessarily author it herself. The sponsor of the bill couldn't even tell us. It is estimated that 80% of minors between the ages of 12 to 17 have been exposed to pornography, with 54% of teenagers seeking it out. Okay? For starters, when they say teenagers, is that the same 12 to 17? Because I don't think a 12-year-old is a teenager. That's an adolescent. All right? These distinctions are important because we need to know, for instance, it says estimated 80% of minors have been exposed to it. How? How were they exposed to pornography? Were they just trying to get online, go to Facebook, see who's talking about who, and then bam, all of a sudden they got porn? Or would they go to a website and they were trying to read something cool about something that's very child friendly and they were hit with porn? Exactly how is this happening? How frequently is it happening? That's another. Look, I know I'm nitpicking, but it's important to nitpick because when we don't nitpick, we don't get good bills. When you don't understand the scope of the problem, then you cannot resolve it. It's not that I didn't walk into this saying, oh, how dare you come after porn? And I was clutching my pearls. There are so many bad jokes that could be made here. I'm going to ignore them. This tells you how long I've been on the internet, just so you know. But the point being is that we need to get into the details because the devil is in the details. Once we understand the details, then we can understand whether or not this solution is appropriate. Let me give you an example that's unrelated to porn. We don't have to worry about any bad jokes that are underlying the commentary. So I used to work for a distribution company, a fastener distribution company. It was a warehouse, okay? And my job was to go to the customer's production lines and evaluate the system that was in place. What we wanted is we wanted just enough material to get there so that they didn't run out, but we didn't want too much material because, number one, there was only a limited amount of space to store all of this. Not only that, the way that it worked is we would send them a shipment and then send them a bill, and then they would have their 30 days, 90 days, or whatever their contract said to pay for that material. But then they would have that material sitting in their production facility, and then they're producing, things, whatever they're producing, and then those things have to be sold, and then they have to get paid for that. So there is this point where they could have thousands upon thousands of dollars just sitting there waiting to go on something that they're building. And then after that, then they have to sell it. And then so basically you have your money tied up. So my job was to say, okay, let's make sure that quantity of material is low enough so that they don't run out, because we don't want a stoppage of the line, but also not too much so that they don't just have a bunch of money basically sitting there doing nothing. That was my job. And believe it or not, people in office environments, they're some of the worst people to identify, okay, where is there a pain point? Where is there a bottleneck? Where can we improve? At the slightest drop of a problem, they're ready to basically be like Congress, and they're like, here's all these new rules that we should apply. And I would sometimes go, okay, but these rules aren't really going to solve the problem. Why not? Well, because number one, you've identified the problem poorly. Here's where the real problem exists. And then I would explain this, and I would say, if we apply your solution, it's not going to do anything. So I constantly had to push back, right? Same concept applies here. If you don't understand the problem in full, which means nitpicking at all of the details, then you're going to apply a solution, think that you've got a handle on it, and guess what? You won't. And then later you'll just make up some BS. You'll say, well, it's because we didn't put enough money in it. It's because of this. It's because you'll make excuse after excuse after excuse when at the end of the day, the real problem was you didn't know what the hell you were doing. That's really the problem. And I saw this even outside the context of saving the children, in the context of whenever there's a process, whenever there's, things that have to be evaluated, and you look into the details and you say, what are the details? Here the details say 80% of minors have been exposed. Okay. How often? How frequently? What is the case? How are they being exposed to this? Is it their friend going and saying, dude, is it like the 13-year-old boy says to his 13-year-old friend, he goes, dude, check this out. Look at this naked lady. Look what she's doing. Right? Is that what, and he found it because somebody sent him a picture? Okay? Because that's being exposed to it. And this legislation, none of this would stop that. If they got a picture and they're passing it around on Snapchat or whatever the cool, social media app that they use is. How many times have you gotten a picture from a friend through a text message? And then you laugh and you're like, that's a funny meme. I'm going to post that on social media. Right? Like, was that part of the exposure? Of the 80% of minors that are exposed to pornography, what if, and I'm just making numbers up, what if a quarter of the 80%, so that would be 20% of minors, are being exposed through websites, and then the other 75%, right? And I'm trying not to be too confusing with all the numbers, but the other 3/4 of them, 60% of children, if you're following the math, I think I got it right. If they're being exposed through friends that have access some other means, through text message, through a Snapchat that somebody was able to find and upload, whatever. Maybe they created it with AI. Maybe they did. Like, there's all these different ways. This is probably why the filters don't work, because you've identified poorly how they're accessing it, and then you say, well, just do it this way, and then people do, and then you're like, we still got a problem. Well, duh, you didn't identify the proper problem, how things were happening, and whether or not you could even legislate for that. Let's continue. Let's see here. The internet here says is the most common source for minors to access pornography, with pornographic websites receiving more web traffic in the United States than Twitter, Netflix, Pinterest, and LinkedIn combined. Now, it sounds on the surface, okay, it says the internet is the most common source for minors to access pornography. But again, how? Are they going to Google and they're typing in, some salacious term so that they'll get something? Or are they just typing in a web address like hotnakedbabes.com and going there? Right? I don't know if that's a real site, but it probably is, right? How are they accessing this? That is the detail that we need to know. Exposure to online pornography has created unique psychological effects for minors, including anxiety, addiction, low self-esteem, body image disorders, and increase in problematic sexual activity at younger ages, and an increased desire among minors to engage in risky sexual behavior. Perhaps this is all true. Where is the evidence for this? But again, it's talking about exposure, and I don't necessarily disagree that if a child watches, look, We've got adults out here that watch porn, and then and you see this, you hear about this all the time in marriage counseling, right? Some husband watches porn, and then he goes into the bedroom with his wife, and he's like, let's do this thing, right? And the wife's like, yeah, that's kind of weird. I don't want to do that. And he's like, oh, come on, right? You know, whatever. We've heard about this. So it makes sense that children would be even more problematic with this because they can even less be, they can be discerning even less with what is real, what is not, right? It's like you have to recognize like, okay, whatever you see on TV isn't necessarily what real life is. Doesn't matter what, it doesn't matter if it's something wholesome. It still may not be real life. You know, Superman is not real life. That's pretty wholesome, right? That's pretty family friendly, but it's not real life, you know, in many ways. You know, so I think the bigger problem is that we haven't addressed the idea that what you see on TV, what you see on social media is not real, right? It's not real life. It doesn't work that way. It's just like, I'll give you a good example that's unrelated to all of this. Think about online bullies. A lot of people online will do and say things that they would never do in real life. Why? Because the consequences, the potential consequences in real life are just so high, they might get punched in the face, that they're unwilling to do it. Or they would have, like if you want to make a picture of somebody, you know, and you want to post it online, you could do it more anonymously. You could do it more discreetly. Whereas if you want to make a picture making fun of somebody in real life, you have to print it out. You have to hold it. Your fingerprints get on it, blah, 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 all that good stuff, right? You get more associated with it. You can kind of distance yourself when you're online. So there's this vast difference between the reality of the real world and anything we see online. And let me just tell you, I've been online a long time, and let me tell you, everybody suffers something from online. Everybody. We're on there too much, right? We spend way too much time. We're not productive. You know, maybe that's not low self-esteem. Maybe that's not a body image issue, but it could be. I see it all the time in these conversations on how relationships should go. Man, the advice is I've talked about it. The advice for relationships is bad. It's terrible, right? So I'm not sure that we have it figured out for adults, let alone children, you know? And then all of these issues here that they're listing, anxiety, addiction, low self-esteem, body image, problematic sexual activity at younger ages, increased desire to engage in risky sexual behavior. None of these are new. These existed when I was in high school before the internet. Now, they may be getting worse, but then you're going to have to figure out, and you're going to have to say, okay, what can we expect absent internet pornography and separate that from what we have now? So if we were to put numbers on all this, let's just say, we're making up numbers. Let's say that before the internet, these things were a problem with 10% of the children. And then after the internet, we can see that they've graduated to 50% of the children. Okay? So now you have a 40-point spread. So now you know, okay, it's gotten way worse with the internet. So now you have some numbers, some data, you know, something that you can look at concretely and say, this is how bad the problem is. Or what if the numbers were to say, before the internet, 10% of the kids were engaging in this, and after the internet, it's now 15%. Okay, well, that's a big difference. That tells you the bulk of the problem is not really the internet. The internet makes it a little worse, but not even twice as worse. Right? It's only a 50% increase. These are the details we have to know. Otherwise, we're going to apply a solution. We're going to disrupt all of these markets. We're going to interfere with all these adults, and we may not even solve the problem. And at the end of the day, I'm not interested in doing something that I'm not confident will actually solve the problem, which first we have to identify and understand well. All right. It goes on and says the Supreme Court of the United States has recognized on multiple occasions that Congress has a compelling government interest to protect the physical and psychological well-being of minors, which includes shielding them from indecent content that may not necessarily be considered obscene by adult standards. Okay. I'm gonna kind of touch a nerve here. I disagree. I don't think that Congress has a compelling government interest to protect minors. You might be like, whoa, wait a minute. How are you even a liberty dad at this point? Because my view of government says that, number one, the federal government's job is to protect the United States as a whole, not necessarily worry about individuals, not in their laws, okay? Not any particular group. That is a state level at most. When states came out and said, we have a problem with pornography, a lot of them maybe just did like a simple resolution, which has no binding power. They're just like, we think there's a problem here. Okay, we can look into the details and we can see, is there in fact a problem? Is it getting worse? And it might be. I mean, the internet is a pretty rough place sometimes. So it could be getting worse. And I'm not denying that. But I don't think for our system of government that it is proper for Congress to be dealing with this. That is the role for the states. Because what they're basically saying is, we have a compelling interest, and they're generally going to fall along like crossing state lines, crossing international lines, and so therefore that gives them their in. It's very similar to the porn problem, if you will. Like, how is the access managed? Oh, no, that's not a good way to say it. What is the way in, right? Like what was that comment a little bit ago? Some of you, I see some of your comments in there. Y'all trip. Let's see. Where was it here? There was a comment here. Okay, Okay, there's a lot of comments here. I'm trying to look for that one particular comment. It was by, I can't find it now. That's okay. Oh, well. There's a lot of comments in here, and I was trying to find the one particular comment. I'm still going to look. Let me see. Let's see. Oh, yeah, here it is. Oddsman said, protect the children is the root passphrase to the U.S. Constitution. Tim May. Okay, yes, it is a passphrase, protect the children. And then when we look at compelling government interest, that is part of this passphrase ideology, if you will. Like, oh, it's crossing state lines. We have a vested interest, okay? But I want to point out something very interesting, since we're on the topic of compelling government interest. Do you know that that the Supreme Court has ruled that the police do not have a duty to protect you? Now, what that means is, if I'm in harm's way, the police don't have to necessarily jump in and protect me. If they're holding me, if they've detained me, then they do. But outside of that, they don't. So I want you to think about that for a minute. Congress is saying, hey, the Supreme Court has said Congress has a compelling government interest. It's really only based on the fact that these are crossing state lines. It's not really that they actually have a compelling interest to protect minors or protect people, because if they did, then we would apply that same standard to police and say, hey, police, since you guys want to talk about, you might wake up and this will be the last day that you put on the badge and come home, right? Since you want to say that all the time, by the way, you have a compelled government interest in protecting people. So the police don't have to necessarily protect you. Like, they can't be held liable if they don't protect you, but somehow Congress has a duty to protect your children. No. Like, we're not even being consistent in society. We should at least be consistent and say either the government has to protect people from dangers, and we start with dangers that are very clear-cut. A murderer is clear-cut. Watching porn is not clear-cut. Maybe some kids will watch it and go, that's gross, and walk away. Maybe some will look at it and go, wow, that's really awesome. This must be exactly how sexy time should go, right? And so their mind is now damaged, right? And it happens. I'm not disputing that it happens. What I'm disputing is, number one, is this the proper role? And number two, have you even figured out the problem well enough to be offering a solution? And the answer seems to be no. Here we go. Here's my highlight. And this is in the bill. Because blocking and filtering software has not produced the results envisioned nearly 2 decades ago, it is necessary for Congress to pursue alternative policies to enable the protection of the physical and psychological well-being of minors. So government 2 decades ago couldn't figure it out. So then you say, well, we got to keep trying. Why? Why are you trying when you clearly didn't figure it out the first time? And when some simpleton like me can get on air and say, you don't even sound like you understand the problem. And then you're offering ideas that are not yet verified. So it seems like you just saw, wow, you can take my hand and you can go with the picture and then you can tell if I'm an adult or not. That's great. Let's use it. Well, wait a minute. How robust is it? And how many people would be affected who cannot use it for some medical reason? And then what alternative are they supposed to use? Right? And how will that alternative protect their privacy? These are all questions that aren't being answered. So as far as I'm concerned, this bill should fail. It doesn't. Let's be very clear. We're not failing the bill because I don't believe that children should be protected. We're failing the bill because, number one, I don't believe this is the purview of the federal government. And I've been very consistent on this on many things. Okay? But if you want to apply it at the state level, that would be better because then at least you would have 50 different ways of doing this in theory, right? And so then we could look and weigh out and say, which one works the best? Now you might say, well, DL, that's not fair because the internet's all over the place, so therefore it's got to be within Congress. Okay, fine. If that's your argument, then come to the table with a very clear, this is the problem. This is exactly how the internet is distinct in this, in perpetuating the problem than any other method, right? Like, how is the problem different today than when we had nudie magazines, right? How is it different today? Specify that. That information has to be there. And if you cannot articulate it, then you don't really know the problem. Then you have to say, all right, here's our solution. How will that create a solution that we can all agree worked? Okay, I may not like an idea, but I will have to acknowledge whether it worked or not. And then, on top of all that, if a program works, or even if it doesn't, what are the consequences of this idea? You can come up with ideas that will work mostly, or at least, to some degree, but are objectively bad ideas. So here's imagine Congress said, any adult caught assisting a child, in any way, shape, or form in accessing pornography, they'll be put to jail forever. They'll be put in prison. We'll send them to the jail in El Salvador, right? Like, imagine, I'm making this up. I'm not suggesting this for real. I'm saying, like, what if that was that's a steep penalty. And a lot of adults are going to be like, I don't want to have anything to do with that. And will you see a decrease? Probably. But what are the consequences of that? Right? Like the consequences may be more than we're willing to bear. And it may not, like, you might say, okay, the consequences were way too far. There was some other better way where we could have achieved these same results, but without going to this extreme. Right? So this is the conversation that we have to have. And we don't seem to be having it. We're not having this debate. And as far as I'm concerned, when you're dealing with the free market, you have to absolutely allow the free market to operate. And right now, it seems like the free market doesn't really care because only 39% of the parents were even utilizing the tools that were available in the first place. Well, if they're not going to, if the parents aren't going to enforce it, does Congress really have that much of an interest? Why would Congress have more of an interest than a parent? Now you might say, well, DL, parents should be better. Yeah, parents should be a lot of things. I agree, parents should be better. But is it Congress's job to make them better? Is it Congress's job to fill in for when parents aren't doing the job? At what point do we say, whoa, that's not a good idea? I would say it's not a good idea from the outset. Think about I'm not even going to try to suggest. Just think about all the ways that a parent could fail that you think might need some intervention. And then I want you to think about all the ways somebody else might think that. And then just imagine all these get implemented. Are you scared yet? You should be, because you should be able to envision some ways, some situations where somebody else would go, yeah, that's a failure on a parent. We need to do something about that. And this law would be good, where you would go, whoa, I think that's too far. Everybody should be able to envision that. This is why we need to have this conversation. This is why we need to first start with, what do the parents want? Are the parents really interested in this? Do they give up? Are they just ignorant? Do they not know the scope of the problem? Do they not know these tools exist? Do they not know how to follow up and make sure that the tools that do exist are being used properly? Like what's going on here? There's way too many unknowns to be supporting legislation like this. So as far as I'm concerned, she can say all she wants. It's about the children and who would want to prevent this or who would want to, vote against it. The person that wants to vote against it is the person that's going to look at it and say, you haven't really identified the problem itself, nor have you come up with a very robust solution for which we can hold you accountable for. And if it doesn't work, we will know, get rid of it. Because that's one of the big problems that we have with laws on the books. We put a law on the books. It doesn't work. We say, we need more money. We need stronger, restrictions. We need to do this because it turns out we didn't realize this. And if we just did this one other thing, that'll totally make it work. And if we look at things like prohibition, if we look at the drug war, if we look at, pornography itself, we've clearly not been able to do this. So it seems to me that the right answer is to say, we're not ready at a minimum. Even if you support doing this at the federal level, you should acknowledge we're not ready. Should not be any bills, because the verification system that she wants to use, it's not even been independently tested. Of course, the company's going to say that it works. Are they going to come out and go, hey, we've got this new technology and you should implement it. It only works 50% of the time, but you should totally use it because we're going to get better. Maybe, or maybe not. It might be that 50% is the best it's ever going to work. We don't know, because nobody's asking these questions. We're rushing to solve a problem. So let's see here. Where are we? Oh, I'm getting an alert here. Like, hey, you're over time. Let me get to this second bill. Let's look at that one real quick, and then we'll wrap it up. Let's see here. Where did I want to go? Here we go. So let me swap this out here. Where are you? Is it this one? That's one. Okay. So let's go here, and we're going to. This bill is much shorter. This is only 3 pages, but I thought this was kind of interesting. All right. So this is H.R. 3297. So let's take a look at this one real quickly. This is to define obscenity for the purposes of the Communications Act of 1934 and for other purposes. This act may be cited as the Interstate Obscenity Definition Act. Scroll down here. The term obscene or obscenity, when used in a manner or context that explicitly refers to or could apply to a picture, image, graphic image file, film, videotape, or other visual depiction, includes a picture, image, graphic image file, film, videotape, or other visual depiction. Basically, they're like, look, if you can see it. Here, taken as a whole, appeals to the prurient interest in nudity, sex, or excretion. It makes sense when you think about it. I'm not going to go into detail. Okay? So they're saying, like, look, if you have this prurient interest, okay, what is that? Or, yeah, prurient interest. What does that mean? I have that definition here. Where are you? Where did you go? I lost it. Maybe I don't have it. Thought I had it. I had it pulled up, but I guess I closed it. It's basically when you when you're interested more than normal, right? And you're like, All right, then it goes on. It says, depicts, describes, or represents an actual or simulated sexual act or sexual contact, actual or simulated, normal or perverted sexual acts, or lewd exhibition of the genitals with the object, intent to arouse, titillate, or gratify the sexual desires of a person, and taken as a whole lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. So basically, they're saying we're gonna call it obscene if it in any way gets you excited. But wait a minute, this has nothing to do with children. This isn't about children. This is about changing the definition to of obscenity and making it much more strict. They want to change the definition to basically, if you can see it and you get excited, it's obscene. That's basically it. I mean, you might be able to say, okay, if it lacks literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. But you know what the fun part about that is? It's already been deemed, pornography has already been deemed to be artistic by the Supreme Court. So it sounds like this will either do one of two things. Nothing at the end of the day, because it'll be challenged and somebody will go, well, this pornography has artistic value. And they'll make their argument in the Supreme Court. They might say, okay, you've made a good argument. Therefore, this is artistic. And then the law fails, right? That's one path. Another path is we restrict it so heavily that things that adults should be able to watch, they won't. So in my mind, what's going on here, the big truth of the matter is that they're really just trying to go after porn. They're really trying to legislate morality. And I think it's going to fail because it has failed time and time again. And then they'll go out and they'll complain and they'll go, we were just trying to protect the children. Not really. It's time that we say, if you make a half-assed effort and you put together legislation that seems to be for some other purpose, or you put together legislation that is vague and open-ended and not very clear, right, or has a lot of problems that some schmuck on the internet could point out who's not even a lawyer, then perhaps you're not really trying to protect children. Perhaps you're just throwing it at the wall, whatever sticks, and seeing what happens. Perhaps that's what's going on. Braille porn. Some of you guys are nuts. But, you know, you make a good point, Keith. What about romance novels, right? Oh, there. What about romance novels, especially the trashy ones? Those are dangerous too. Yeah, it's not visual depiction, but what about that monster porn that women sometimes read, right? Presumably some men too, I know, blah, blah, blah. But at what point do we stop? And it looks like we're just trying to legislate morality. Now, let me point out something very quickly here. I have talked about this in the past. It is your job as a parent to raise your kid according to the values of your home. My son has a tablet. He has restrictions on the time that he's allowed to use it per day. Every app that he's allowed to use has a restriction on how long he's allowed to use it for. I have what we call whitelisted every single web page. What that means is, well, okay, I don't want to say every. Web pages are whitelisted for him. They're not blacklisted. Now, if you don't know the difference, blacklisted would be saying this website's off limits, this website's off limits, this website's. Well, there's thousands, millions of websites. You can't possibly blacklist them all. So the alternative is to say, here are the websites you're allowed to go to. And if it's not on this list, you're not allowed to go to it, right? So that's happened. Then what I do is I have full control of all the accounts, the one account that he has. It's tied to my personal Google account. So then I can go in and I can review everything that he's watched on YouTube, just to make sure that despite all the other controls, he is viewing things that I want him to watch. Sometimes I will peek over when he's watching and I'll be like, what you watching there, bud? And he will show me. And I'll go, oh, okay. And every great once in a while, I'll see something. I don't spend a lot of time. I'll just look at it and I'll go, I don't think that's good for you. I mean, it's probably not trashy. Maybe I'm overdoing it. But as a parent, I'm just like, yeah, find something else. And then he's like, okay, Dad. And then he goes and finds something else. That is how you parent. When I was growing up, we didn't have the internet. What did my mom do? I would be like, Mom, me and, Freddie, we're going to the lake. Not the lake, but the park. And she would say, okay, cool. And then me and my friend would be at the park, and I'd see my mom drive by. And we'd go, why is your mom driving by? She was checking on me to make sure that I was where I was said I was going to be, right? This is the job of parents. Now, was it easy for her to get in her car and drive? Maybe kind of. But was it a nuisance? Yes. Right? Was it embarrassing that when I wanted to spend the night at a friend's house, she would call up and have a long conversation with that parent, and she would be like, so, do you have any guns in the house? Who's going to be there? Are both parents going to be there? When do you go to sleep? Are you locking the doors? Will my kid be able to get outside? And she just like, she probably was trying to protect me, but at the time I felt like she was just trying to embarrass me with all these questions. And then I would talk to my friend and they'd be like, dude, my mom asked the same thing. So I'd feel a little relief. That is what a parent is supposed to do. It is not the government's job to parent your children for you. And if you support legislation like this, what's going to end up happening is that they will go further likely than you will want them to go. And they will over-legislate. Or they won't even protect your children, but they'll sure as heck get you. You want to know why? I'll get a couple more comments and then we'll end. Let me make this my last comment on this point. Remember growing up and your parents were like, Johnny, come here. Figure out how to get HBO on here for me because I can't figure out this button. So if our parents couldn't figure out the remote, and if parents today are not as technologically advanced as our kids, then you won't even be like, you're just hoping that some other parent or some other old person has got it all figured out and they will protect your kid better than you can, even though you're literally right there. You could look through history, you could do all these different things, but you want some other old person who probably is just as terrible at technology to figure it out when you can't. That's the blind leading the blind. So if they do something, chances are they're going to come up with an idea. Some child is going to be able to circumvent it like they always do, but the parents won't. It's basically going to be the aspirin bottle all over, but for the internet. It's the aspirin bottle for the internet. I can't open this bottle, but my kid can, even though the kid's not supposed to be able to, and I'm supposed to be able to open it. That's where we're headed, in my opinion. And that's even if these bills stand legitimate scrutiny in a court of law, which I don't think they will. All right, let's see what else. Okay, some of these things I'm not saying online, guys. Braille porn, you guys are funny. Let's see what else we got here. Yes, I think this is probably the most dead on point in the chat. Newsflash. If a kid wants to watch porn, they're going to watch porn. Guess the DVDs will make a comeback. See what I did there? Okay, I didn't read it all the way through before I read that out loud. All right, I'm getting off here. Guys, I will see you tomorrow. We're going to talk about Rumble.